Good evening. Good evening, everyone. And thank you for coming to this discussion and launch for Maxim Znak's book, The Zekameron, 100 Days Behind Bars and Eyelashes. Maxim is currently in a penal colony in Belarus, sentenced to 12 years. He is recognized as a prisoner of conscience by Amnesty International. We are very fortunate to be joining with the human rights organization Libereco in organizing this evening. Libereco is an independent Swiss-German non-governmental organization dedicated to the protection of human rights in Belarus and Ukraine. Here in Scotland, Ken McBain is leading Libereco, and I'm very grateful for his input in inviting our guest speaker, Ilya Saleh, and spreading the word and summoning an audience. He's currently here at the back of the theatre operating the live stream, and we'd like to formally welcome everyone who is watching on the live stream. We're going to start the evening with a short film which just gives the context in which this book was written.
Это в них фаер кинули?
My name is Jean Finlay and I represent Scotland Street Press, the publisher. On my left, I have Jim Dingley and Ella Dingley, who are the translators. Jim is a veteran translator. He studied Russian at Cambridge in the late 1960s and has since held several university positions in Russian, Ukrainian and Eastern European studies. He's translated 2 books from Belarusian for Scotland Street Press, both PEN Award winners, as is this one. He was awarded a Francis Skarenko Medal in 1991 and a Jubilee Medal in 2019 for his contribution to Belarusian studies. He's married to Ella Dingley, who co-translated this book with him. Ella is from Belarus herself, a teacher. She has taught Russian at the School of Slavonic and East European Studies. She's worked as a stringer for BBC World Service and the Belarusian Service of Radio Liberty. We all extend a very warm welcome to Ilya Saleh, an international lawyer who graduated from the Belarusian State University and also from Duke University in North Carolina in the United States. He was a lawyer and one of the managers of Libereco's 2020 presidential campaign office in Belarus. Together with Maxim Znak, Saleh acted on behalf of Tikhanovskaya, appealing the results of the 2020 Belarusian presidential election to the Supreme Court of Belarus. On the 9th of September 2020, Ilya was detained by the KGB. He was arrested and charged with threatening the national security of Belarus. The Coalition of Belarusian Human Rights Organization, headed by Vyazna Human Rights, and the Belarusian Helsinki Committee recognized Saleh as a political prisoner. Amnesty International has deemed Saleh a prisoner of conscience. The Law Society of England and Wales and the American Bar Association wrote official letters to Lukashenko and the Belarusian authorities demanding the immediate release of Saleh. Duke community members issued a public statement in connection with the arrest calling for his release. On the 16th of October 2020, he was released from Minsk Pretrial Detention Center No. 1 and placed under house arrest. On the 16th of April 21, he was released on bail but remained under prosecution. On the 13th of August, he announced that he had left Belarus for Poland, and we're very pleased to say that he has found his way from Poland to Edinburgh and is able to be with us here this evening. I'm going to start with Jim and Ella, the translators, who are going to talk a little bit about the translation.
Thank you, Jean. I thought it might be a good idea to start with how the manuscript first arrived in this country, TypeScript. On the 7th of February last year, so only just over a year ago really, I received an email from a person of whom I'm sure the Belarusians here certainly have heard, Maria Martinsevich, who is a well-known poet and literary expert teacher, containing a message for Scotland Street Press and with the manuscript as an attachment. I sent everything off to Jean, and when Jean and I met each other on the 13th of March last year at another Belarusian event, a performance of Bacharevich's Dogs of Europe, and if you ever get a chance to see it, do, at the Barbican, yes, Jean agreed the Scotland Street Press would publish. This was later confirmed, and contact was made with Irina Korzikova, Maxim's sister, who is his literary agent. On the 14th of May last year, I signed the contract with completion on the 31st of August. In fact, I think I finished about a week before that. And on the 12th of October 2022, the first set of proofs was received. So things have moved really very fast. In this particular case, a book with a very special origin and of a very special nature. Now, there were several aspects of working together with Ella as a joint translator. The way in which we found it worked best was that I would make a rough translation of, say, a story. Ella would then go through it and we would review the whole text, and we did this several times for each story until we got what we thought was the best possible version. Now, Ella is going to tell you about some of the experiences, but in general terms, one of the things that I can say about the book is that it wasn't at the time complete We received the dedication later, and then it was on Sunday, last Sunday, that I learned that in the Belarusian edition there is in fact a poem as well, 6-line poem, which I never saw. So that is something for the future, I think.
Do you want to translate it?
No, I mean, shall I take time to translate it? Yeah? Okay. It's after the contents. There it is.
I'll read it in Russian.
Read it in Belarusian, yeah.
Запросив бы тебе у свою хату, тут заўсёды частуюць гарбатай, і ніколі не згасне святло. Толькі ты не прыходзь, тут нядрэнна, але тыдні знікаюць дарэмна, быццам іх нагул не было.
Thank you. Okay, without rhyme, really, and that is just making up as I go along, really. I would invite you to my cottage. We'll always treat you to a cup of tea here, and the light will never go out. Except, don't come. It's not bad here, but the weeks disappear in vain, as though they never were. Now, one of the things that also struck me is that there was no subtitle to the book in the typescript, but I noticed that the Belarusian version has a Dokumentalny roman, documentary novel title. The German translation, which I've also seen, has Geschichten aus dem Gefängnis, stories from the prison, and as you can read, we've got eyes and eyelashes. So we start off with a bit of a mystery. What are eyelashes in this book? When you read it, you'll find out. The other thing that I changed deliberately was in the title of one of the stories. If you look through the book, you'll find that the stories all have a title that derives from the story. I did not understand the title of the story that is devoted to fungus and mushrooms. It was something ex-Lukoshko, and I didn't know what ex-Lukoshko means. And obviously, I can't ask the author. So hence I was reading the poems of Sylvia Plath, as I pick up sometimes, and she has this poem on mushrooms. So I took a line from it. Tomorrow we'll take over the world. Mushrooms. And of course that's true. If any of you are looking at that series that was a video game called The Last of Us, when fungus makes the species jump, you'll find out what a horrible future will be in store for mankind if it happens. Then other things that I worried about were the footnotes. I think footnotes are a killer in a book, actually, because it makes it look academic. On the other hand, it's impossible to avoid. There were two that I omitted, and perhaps I ought to have included. One of them was about Bleak House. I don't know how many people have read Bleak House here, but it's ironic, of course, that in a book written by a lawyer, we have a book that is also Dickens wrote a partial satire on the legal profession. The context of mentioning Bleak House, of course, is that in the story, someone is so pickled in alcohol that he self-combusts. And of course there's the example of Crook in Bleak House, who combusts surrounded by piles and piles of paper. And the other one was a technical Belarusian question. Two sets of initials, BCB and AUE. Now, do I put BCHB and transliterate it as white, red, white, which is what I've got, which means therefore political, or AUE? I can't remember what on earth AUE stands for, but it's an abbreviation that is applied to young people who glorify the life of criminals. And I thought, well, that's going to need a long message. So in the end, I decided, or with Ella, we decided political criminal. Now maybe that's the Germans, for example, have kept that. Maybe that's the best thing to do. I don't know. I wasn't sure. And one thing puzzled us both. In one of the stories, two inmates are playing chess, and the loser wins the salmon that's arrived. Now, I thought, can this be right? I mean, I welcome opinions here. All right, probably nobody here has been in a Soviet prison. It's just my age. In a Belarusian prison, but would people lose chess in order to eat salmon? I don't know. I just hope we've got it right and there's not something wrong in the text. Now, I'd really like to give Ella a chance to talk about some of the interesting things that we discovered. Ella, I found, was a valuable co-translator because she has assets such as being an insider and with special insights into Soviet education and therefore into the education of the countries that have come after the Soviet Union. And we had to work out what the nearest equivalents were of a number of items. Now, I'm thinking particularly about the word platzkart. We decided it's a sleeper train economy class. Whether that's right or not, I don't know. Happily, there was no tambour in it where people are all going out for a smoke, because there's certainly no similar concept in English. And Ella, in a stroke, I think in a fit of genius, translated the words basir и веселые, which refers to a caste of prisoners, as footloose and fancy-free. It's absolutely right for the context, I think. And I'd like Ella now to move on to give you some of her experiences in translating, please.
Let's say story number 43, which is Maxim Znak book, was called Ururu. When you think Ururu, what's Ururu? And then when I started thinking Ururu, it's an onomatopoeic word for a sound of water that goes through the pipes. Ururu, ururu, ururu. Because in that particular story, he talks about means of communications between the different cells. And they use the pipe system. So they just send the message through the pipe system, where the water is used and the sound is ururu, water going through the pipes. So when I was just walking like day after day after day, ururu into myself, ururu, 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 ururu. And then, God goodness me, suddenly it just struck me like, gosh, it's something to do with witches, because witches are doing their potions in their cauldrons, and there is something babbling there. Oh, babble, 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 babble. And then I came to that double, double, toil and trouble. And then it come to Babbling Brook by Tennyson. And I said, look, babbling line, babble line, that's what it is. Ururu is a babble line. And Jim agreed.
What else could I do?
There was another story, story number 41, Masha, how they created a snow girl, a snow lady from the snow. And in that story, there was the relevant sentence in English originally read, there was no breeze in the yard, the temperature was a little above freezing, and with all the guns hanging on the wall, it was going to be impossible to avoid a gunshot. And then in brackets, Jim wrote, I assume he means that there are icicles hanging on the wall and at least one of them is bound to fall, but I doubt whether the metaphor will be understood. So we started thinking about this metaphor, and I said, look, I'm pretty sure, I can guarantee when he talks about that guns that has to be shot, it's about the Chekhov guns. Because if on a stage there is a gun, it must to shoot at the very end of the play. So Jim decided to make it easy. He added the word Chekhov in the translation. It is not in Znak's, but it's in the English translation. I don't know if it's right or wrong, but we did it.
Put up with it.
And another story, number 22. It was a story about the guy who joined the cell, and he was like a chef. He knew how to prepare food. You never can mix up mayo and ketchup. No. And because in the cell, people, they would mix up whatever they've got to make their food a little bit tastier. And the last words in that story were the guy was taken for a couple of days somewhere doing something else, and then he returned to the same cell, and the guys without him went into the previous ways of mixing up mayo and, because before that he was trying to train them to be gourmands in their foods. And when he came back, he was so disappointed. The last words he said, "Но ничего не сказал, просто сел есть, без толку." So the initial translation was, he didn't say anything, he just sat down and started eating mindlessly. And I said, "Без толку, mindlessly." No, it's because of these guys. They didn't listen to him. He tried to teach them, and they didn't listen to him. So the final version was, he sat down, he didn't say anything. Stupid twats, the lot of them. There we are.
Yeah, thank you. Just one or two things, just to finish off. I think that prisoners' language is almost bound to be colourful. I'm sure you understand what I mean by colourful. And there was no real example of that in Znak, but there are very real examples of it in the translation. It's unavoidable, I think, in English. I cannot imagine anything being said by a prisoner, by many of them anyway, without the necessary kind of colourful vocabulary. What I tried to do, though, was not to use prisoner slang in English.
But we've got a book at home for prisoner slang.
By somebody called Noel Razor Smith. A beautiful name. The kind of terminology that I agreed in is very peculiar to the context of the book. We don't talk about prison warders anymore, we talk about prison officers, but I've not always said officer, I've also said warder, I've used a number of terms. And the swear words, the prison officer language, it's there in the translation. It's not necessarily there in the original, although I can feel it is there. I can imagine what would be said in Russian in a lot of cases. Okay, thank you. Any questions?
There's going to be a time at the end for questions, but I'd like to move on to Ilya, who was imprisoned with Maxim Znak, arrested with him and imprisoned with him. And Ilya is very kindly going to read for us about 4 of the 4 stories.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for the invitation. It's a true pleasure. And when you were talking about the way how we were translating some words from Russian into English, when I was reading the Russian version and I saw that word "platskart," that was exactly what questioned me, like, how are you going to translate it? Because "platskart" is something that doesn't exist in Scottish, British, English, or anywhere in the world. And when I saw today that it's a slipper of economy class, and we discussed it with the guys today, someone even said that it's a lower economy class by Scottish standards. Definitely. So thank you very much. I see the translation is indeed great, and I mean, it's so great that there are so many words that I have no even idea what they mean in English. But this means a lot to Maxim, and Maxim really treats this book as a literature. For him, It's not a political statement, it's not a political action, it's rather an art, and he really wants to tell the world that there are people on the other side of that wall, that there are people living in jail, there are people with their stories, with their tragedies, and people try to, you know, live this through with humor, because otherwise it's very difficult to go through this hard period of their lives and through a hard period of Maxim life. That's why he is trying to give a lot of humor to all of us through this book, and he, you know, tries to stay positive despite all of the hard things that he faces today. And that's why I think it is extremely important to read, first of all, author's dedication in the book, because this is exactly the words that I think are the most important to Maxim. So, author's dedication. With gratitude from the bottom of my heart, to my mother and to her mother, who had such faith in me that I was suddenly able to become the man I am today. To my grandfather, who taught me to whatever I do, I should do with style. And to my other grandfather, the one who returned, became the father of my father, and taught me to play chess. To my father, who once again has to look after me. To my sister, who has become my voice, brighter, more talented, and sincere than my own. To my son Ales, who has been compelled to become the man of the house in my stead, and of course to my wife Nadezhda, my defender, who did not reject me back then at the registry office, who I helped far too little, and who fought so hard for me in the courtroom that I, for the first time ever, burst into tears of happiness. These beds of emotion, moments of sense in the all-pervading, hopeless gray gloom, these echoes of smiles, sad, but smiles nevertheless, they are of course for all of you. Maxim Znak. Maxim writes in this book a lot about people. Of course, this book is about Belarusian penitentiary system, the heritage that we got from the Soviet times, but mainly, once again, I will underline that this book is about people. And there are stories that reflect that people don't want to lose hope, even being in the cell, even understanding that they will be sentenced to many, many years in prison, but they still try to keep their hope alive. And I think the very first story reflects this a lot. Law court. He was transferred here and then transferred somewhere else. That's how they all come and go. He's got 19 springtimes behind him, and he might have another 8 winters ahead of him. It's quite a lot, but then it's no more than what a lot of people get. Oh yes, and he didn't deserve to end up inside. That's what they all say. He hadn't yet tired of telling everyone how unjust the world was, how the system is the same everywhere, how there is no point in hoping for a not guilty verdict. Surprisingly enough, there were listeners who would nod their heads systematically and occasionally interrupt with stories of their own that had been told thousands of times already. This probably had some sort of soothing effect. What can you count in the courtroom? What the prosecutor asks for is what they will give you. Who's gonna try to work out what's right? No, they almost always give you less than what the prosecutor asks for. Maybe they do, but not by much. The main thing is they'll never find you not guilty. They won't even listen. It's not so much not listening. They won't even hear. And of course, there is no chance of being found not guilty. Then he said something unexpected. Never mind, I'll appeal to the International Court. Which one? I've got it written down somewhere. So tell me which one. I happen to be a lawyer, and I don't think we had ratified anything. I can't remember offhand. There was this bloke from a maximum security colony with me when I was being transferred, and he wrote down for me what court to write to. He said they will make a judgment there. It's been tried and it worked. The Hague perhaps, but we haven't signed anything. Or Strasbourg, although we haven't signed anything there either. No, it wasn't those places. It was something else. Well, then have a look. Maybe I can write. If it's a dead cert, we're going to get somewhere. He put a hand into the bag where he kept all his stuff and rummaged around in the depths until he found a scrap of paper torn from a legal document. Between the lines setting out what he was accused of, there were two words, written with flourishes, but somewhat sloppily. The name of the court to which he was advised to appeal, Lynch's Court. This is a reference to Lynch law, which basically means that you get the punishment without a court decision. So that's an irony, but that's how people try not to lose hope, and even if they understand that there is no other court that will listen to their case or that they can apply to, they still try to find ways, and that's how, and this makes their lives easier in prison. The other thing that Maxim writes about, of course, is the system itself. The system, the Belarusian system, penitentiary system, court system, is the inheritance that we got from the Soviet Union. And it's not really different, I think, from any of the other country of the post-Soviet Union. And of course it's scary to be there, but it's scary not because of the people who are there, but because your life really doesn't belong to you there anymore. They can bring you in and out whenever they want. They tell you what to do. They tell you when to sleep or not to sleep. And the most scary part is that you don't know how much time you're going to spend there, because it can be 1 week, it can be 1 month, it can be 10 years. For example, Victor Babarika's son, Eduard Babariko, is still in pre-trial detention for 3 years already without even official charges being put forward against him, just because his father decided to run for president in the country. That's the only reason. And Maxim also writes about a punishment cell. It's the story number 21, called Lenin. Bedtime in the punishment cell had a ritual of its own. First off, there was the wait for the evening inspection. The wait lasted from 6 in the morning to 8 in the evening, with a break for the morning inspection at 8. Then there might be a wait of about 2 hours, or more precisely, an hour and a half, for evening toilet time. At 9:30, there was an opportunity to perform one's evening toilet business and scrub to the heart's content all the teeth left in the mouth. However, in the evening toilet gave rise to a delicate problem. Almost the whole of the upper part of the wall consisted of perspex, transparent and large enough for an eye to be kept on whatever was going on there. Exactly opposite this perspex, and accessed by 2 steps up, was something that was called by several different names in prison, and with which inmates wished to have as few dealings as possible, preferably in total solitude. The way the punishment cell was constructed hardly lent itself to that feeling of total solitude. It felt more like putting on a stage performance. Bearing in mind that this was a women's wing and all of the prison officers were women, there would likely to be some grateful spectators. True, shy individuals didn't make use of the opportunities for self-advertisement and made it look as though they were sprinting to a finish line. With the evening toilet finished, there was a wait for the door to be opened and to hear the words, "Let's go." On hearing the long-desired words, "Let's go," he cheerfully set off round the corner and along the corridor to pick up his mattress. There was just a short time left before he was taken back to the punishment cell, where the bed had already been unlocked from the wall. From then on, things were simple. He kept hold of the mattress with one hand, with the other he lifted up the bed, threw the mattress on it, hung onto it with his free hand, and without letting go, fiddled around beneath the bunk to fix the metal triangle that supports it. At first it all seemed complicated, but by the 3rd day he could do it easily. And then he could lie down. Oh, to lie down and get under the blanket. He didn't give a moment's thought to draft rituals like getting undressed. On the first night, he had nearly frozen to death. Just lie there, stretch out. Close your eyes, don't move a muscle. Please. There he was, behind perspex, lying in the internally bright light of the elongated coffin-like punishment cell with his arms folded on his chest. It's warmer that way. The very image of Lenin in his mausoleum. I'm Lenin, he thought as he fell asleep. Almost immediately his sleep was disturbed by the loud clang of a metal door. Some new girl was being put into the cell opposite. He realized, even without opening his eyes, that she was staring at him through the perspex. He heard her say, "Oh, you've got a young man over there. Where do I go? Here?" The prisoner escort said that the young man wouldn't object, but the young man said nothing. He was Lenin. Once again, I mean, this story reflects how bad it is in the punishment cell, that people almost freeze to death. It's extremely cold. They are not allowed to sit down all the day. The bed is attached to the wall and is being detached only from 8 p.m. to 6 a.m. for them to sleep. All the other part of the day, they need to walk around the cell. They are not allowed to do anything, and that's why, you know, people entertain themselves by just thinking of something. That helps. And probably at that point, Maxim was thinking about how he's going to write this story, and now we're able to read it. What is also important is that people living in prison, they still try to, you know, make their life easy and funny. They try to make jokes and laugh, because then, once again, when you laugh, it's easier to do that. And there is a story, number 39, called Prank, because literally, and I know what I'm saying, I've been in the same pre-trial detention as Maxim is writing about. People like to prank each other, especially when a newcomer comes to cell. They are making a lot of jokes of him, and that's what this story is about. 39, Prank. There hadn't been any newbies for a long time, and they really wanted to have a bit of fun. There were not many opportunities for amusement. True, you had to be careful when you were working up to the prank. People these days were suspicious and didn't believe anything. But on this occasion, it finally all came together. This guy hadn't been here all that long and was still absorbing the knowledge, secrets and habits that his cellmates so generously shared with him. After all, there were lots of ways of doing little things you might never know how they work, and you got a real surprise when you find out. Each of life's little issues had a unique route to a solution, its own form of written request, and each its own special order, and you simply had to know it. Lads, it's my birthday tomorrow. Wow, is that right? How old are you going to be? I'll be entering the roaring 40s. So it's a nice round figure as well. Why didn't you say anything before? Why should I have? At this point, a piece of this jigsaw puzzle fell into place. It became clear that now was a good moment to pull off the prank. The main thing was not to frighten him. He wasn't stupid. Never mind, this was his first time inside. What do you mean, why should I have? Aren't you going to put a cake on the table? Do you mean get one from the prison shop? He had already learned how you buy things inside. No, that way you just get an ordinary bit of shortbread. For a special day, you can make a special order for a big cream-covered sponge. Got any money? Yes, he had some money, and he really felt like having a piece of cream sponge for his birthday. They taught him how to write a special request, how to attach the paid receipt to it, and to hand it to the chief warder of the wing during the cell inspection. They assured him that the correct words to use in the context of the following day's birthday were, "I would earnestly ask you to provide." There were altogether a great number of felicitous phrases in the text of the request. The chief warder managed to keep a straight face during the inspection when the birthday boy said everything he had been told to say and handed him the request. It was only when the cell door was closed that the most sensitive ears could catch the roars of the laughter coming from the duty warder's office. But he didn't hear anything. He was waiting for his cake, and the rest of the cell was expecting the asymmetrical reply. The word was the previous such request had on one occasion been answered with a plate of very badly cooked fish instead of pizza, and on another a coat had been put on a birthday boy and he had been taken off to the showers, but most often the response was simply a thorough shakedown of the cell. The hatch opened, there was a double knock, his surname was called. There was a piece of sponge cake with cream lying on a prison bowl. Everyone was gut-smacked, but he was more surprised than anyone. In the puzzlement, he simply asked, "But what about the lads?" And there are so many pranks like this. So when you get into the cell, sometimes the guys who are already there, they start telling you that once you first arrive in jail, you have a privilege or the right to go to banya, and they call showers simply a banya. But when a newcomer comes, they think of a banya, they imagine sauna or steam room or something like that, and they also write a special request to a ward like, "Can you please bring me and my cellmates to banya?" But when they go to the showers in the jail, they got a little bit disappointed with them. So I think this is the most important thing that Maxim was trying to tell us, that this book is about people first of all, and that all of us, we need to understand that people live not only here on this side of the wall, but also there. People live there. There are people who committed crimes. There are political prisoners there. There are people who work there, but all of them are still people and human beings. Thank you very much.
And before I open it up to the floor for questions, I just like to ask you, Ilya, one or two things. Many writers say that they have to write in order to stop themselves going mad, and this must be so much more extreme under the conditions of that Maxim Znak has, which you have also experienced. And I understand that it's the last jail in Europe where the death penalty is still carried out.
True.
And is there a great fear of this hanging over people?
Can you rephrase the question? Is there a fear of?
Are people aware of this?
Yeah, absolutely. I think most. Yeah, it is. But I mean, Belarus have been living with the death penalty since 1991. So this is just like, it's not. People treat it as normal, unfortunately, like one of the types of the penalty. So that's why people know. Some people know that the executions are being made in this very jail, but some don't. But I don't think that people really think of this. That's the thing.
Just to go back to the first part of the badly phrased question, about sanity, about people keeping their sanity by writing. Obviously, Maxim Znak is somehow able to do this, but were there examples of other people who were not?
I didn't see any mad people in prison. I think, to be honest, it's very difficult, because on one hand, when you get into a cell, it's easier for you because you are not alone anymore with your problems, so you have people to share with. On the other hand, it's even more difficult because other people, I was, for example, in a cell with 19 other guys, and it means that 19 other stories, 19 broken lives, 19 tragedies, 19 simply life stories, and people share it with you, and it's quite difficult, to handle all of this, because you also live this through. You live through not only your tragedy, but also the tragedy of these people. And the only thing that helps is humor. That's why people are trying to live even there, trying to make their life as comfortable as possible. And it's surprising, but people indeed try to help each other there. And this is surprising, and usually, there are no conflicts in the prison cell or something, because people indeed try to understand and to help each other.
And is it easy for families to bring in food or medicines, or send them in, post them in? Do they get parcels? And
yes, it's a pretty standard thing. So you are allowed, I think, to have 30 kilos of food a month, and you are allowed to have medicine once a week. I think Monday is the medicine parcels day or something like that. So there are usually no problems with that. Of course, if they want to put additional pressure on the prisoner, they can, do something with that. But it's usually, on the first stages of the detention in other jails. In that very jail, in detention center number 1, and when people are already under criminal investigation, this is like, the system works. Usually there is no problem with getting food inside, but it's important to understand that the goal of a Belarusian jail or pre-trial detention, I'm talking about pre-trial detention first of all, and not only Belarusian, I think it's our Soviet heritage, and I think it's the same in any other post-Soviet country. So the goal of pre-trial detention is not to isolate a person from the society, which is written in the criminal code. The goal is to make person feel guilty. The goal is for the person to feel that they did something wrong and to confess. So that's simply a way to put pressure on the person for them to confess. And that's the key goal, because in accordance with the law, the goal of the detention is to isolate a person from the society so they do not interrupt into investigation of the criminal case. But unfortunately, that's not really the key goal of pretrial detention, in my opinion.
can you elaborate?
Even more. It's the ideas that I'm saying are those that I had, when I was there, and the key ones I've already told you. The most scary thing is that you don't know for how long are you gonna be there, because the door can open any day. It would be way easier if they just tell you, you'll get out in 1 year. Then at least you know that you have a year. You need to do something, read or write a book, or do some physical education or just something. But when you don't know for how long you're gonna be there, that's what puts pressure on you, really. The other thing is that you always, I've been living in Minsk for all of my life, and I've been passing by this pre-trial detention in the city center of Minsk for hundreds or thousands of times, and I've never thought that there are people who actually live there, and whose whole lives are right now over there. And when you get there and you see these people, and to be honest, the majority of the guys who are there, they can be released the next day because they are not dangerous to Belarusian society. I mean, I'm talking not only about political prisoners, but I'm talking about the famous Article 328, which is basically drugs. And in Belarus, for 1 gram of weed, you can be sent to jail for 7-8 years. And 70% of the pretrial detention are these kids of 18 to 21 who have been caught with 1 gram of marijuana and who has been sentenced to 5, 6, 7 years in jail. And it's scary because you see them in the very beginning of their way, and they will be released only in 7 years, but they will be released when they are already 29 and they spent the most part of their adult life in jail. And guess what? Most of them will go back. And that's the huge problem. And that's what you think also about.
Thank you very much. Can we have some questions from the audience, please? I'm afraid I can't see you. Maybe...
No.
Can we have some likes?
I have a question. Sorry, I will try to formulate it with English. So I really, it was very interesting statement that you said about this, the motivation for this pre-trial jail is to put a pressure on the people. But when you were studying as a lawyer, have you? I understand it's probably slightly similar, slightly different topics that you were studying. Have you had any understanding idea in universities that the system is like that, and why it is, etc.?
The thing is that what you learn in Belarusian law schools is completely different from the reality, you know?
Okay, so you studied in different, it was different topics that you studied, not the real life stuff.
Absolutely, because you study how it's written in law.
Okay.
Exactly. And it's funny because, for example, we learned that the election are free and fair, you know? But then, even when we were studying at the law school, the guys who needed dormitory, who were coming not from Minsk, but from other cities in Belarus, they were simply told, if you don't go to early elections, we will not give you dormitory for the next year. And then they go back to law school and they learn that Belarus is a democratic state of the rule of law. And then you go out in the streets and you see different realities. So.
And how you feel about it as a lawyer? Because it's kind of the stuff that you study.
But this is exactly the reason why Maxim Znak is now in jail. Because he was telling everyone that the things that are happening in real life have nothing to do with the law. And he was explaining it to people. And this is a threat to a government which violates law itself.
Okay, I was studying math in Minsk, and I knew about this. Like, students were not allowed to get back into the hostel if they not go to election early or something like that. But it's a math, and this is a law. So for me, it was kind of very different. Yes, I understand that some injustice. My question is, okay, I really impressed what you and Znak did to kind of show and show this stuff to many people. But you were studying this, you saw this, and this is so what you study and what you see immediately doesn't connect. And it's not only about both two of you; it's lots of other students. How do they feel about that?
I don't know how do they feel about this. I can only tell you how we feel about this. And I don't think that you need to be a lawyer to understand that something is wrong. And I think that 9 million people are living in this, different realities. That's why we have this term of internal immigration, right? Внутренняя иммиграция. It's basically when you don't want to interact with the government. You don't want to leave because it's your home. Why should I leave my home? I mean, it's my country also. And people don't want to leave, but at the same time, they don't want to interact exactly for that reason. Because they understand that the theory and reality are completely different. This is exactly what was written on the screen right before. I want to live in Belarus, which I see on TV. That's exactly, I want to live in Belarus. I mean, if even those laws which are in place in Belarus or that were in place in 2020, if the government was following it, it's a pretty nice, legal framework. I mean, you can live with that, but simply no one cares about it. That's the problem.
Can we have another question? Yes.
Could I just ask a little bit about if there's any distinction made between political prisoners and prisoners like you were talking about the drugs? Do they have any different rights, or are they segregated, or anything? You probably don't realise from my accent that I come from Northern Ireland. And political prisoners made a specific point about being seen as political prisoners. What's your view on that, and what's the reality in Belarus?
So basically, usually, political prisoners under criminal charges, they are together in a cell with other guys who are under criminal charges. So there is no like separate political cells, because basically, if you put 20 political prisoners, because usually the people who are being under criminal investigation political prisoners are usually pretty smart guys, so they don't want them to sit together, 20 of them, and make a plan of something or discuss something. That's why they usually put political prisoners separately, and they're usually one or maximum two political prisoners in the cell. Of course, now I think there is a political prisoner in every cell just because of the number of political prisoners. But previously, like the guys who were in pre-trial detention not under political charges, let's put it this way, were not really happy with having a political prisoner in a cell, because if you have a political prisoner in a cell, it means that all the rules will be followed. I mean, because you cannot sneak into a knife, because there is a political prisoner, the police or the guards will be very attentive to this cell, because political prisoners, they are political, and they don't want to make their life easier, and that's why. But other guys still understand it, and usually, I personally did not have any problems with when they hear your charges, they're just like, okay, political, now we understand. And then once we were watching the news, we have a TV, but you watch propaganda, and on Belarusian state TV, once there was an episode, and they showed me on that episode, and all of these guys were, oh man, now you're done, 100%. You have no way out.
Can I add something to that? I'm
Absolutely.
not sure. I heard recently on the TV that political prisoners now wearing yellow badges so they can be easily seen. And if something happening, that can be easily separated from the rest of the prisoners.
But
because of their badges.
this happens already in penal colonies, because in pre-trial detention you are still wearing your normal clothes, whatever you brought. But exactly when you are in the penal colony wearing already a robe, they put a yellow tag on the political prisoners. It means that this guy can do some extremist stuff, basically, formally. So they put them as extremists separately, and they have yellow tags on their robes. That's true.
Can we have another question?
Firstly, thank you very much. It's been amazing to hear from everyone. So I've got a question for you, Ilya. I was just wondering whether you personally identify with any of the characters in Zekameron. So, are you a chef, for example? To mix mayo and ketchup together?
What a wonderful question.
To be honest, I do not identify myself with anyone about whom I read in the book, but the whole book is a huge flashback for me. Because when I was reading it, and especially the slang words that are used, the types of jokes that are used, they're talking about, there is a story about a guard with like dozens of names, and I realized what guards Maxim is writing about, because I also saw that guard, and he was indeed weird, but it was like a huge flashback for me. That's very interesting feelings. I mean,
He's got a great sense of the absurd, doesn't he? And in fact, on the cover of the Russian version, it's a drawing by Maxim himself, isn't it?
Yes.
yes.
And can you read what it says? Because that's very funny.
That's the drawing of a small elephant. There is a Soviet cartoon, I think, about this elephant who is trying to find his mom, and it basically says here, мне глобальное потепление ухудшает настроение. So global warming makes me sad.
Because it's not an elephant, though.
Yeah. How do you call it?
A mammoth.
Mammoth. Yeah. Hairy elephant. Hairy old elephant. Солнце светит жалко, я шерстистый, жарко. Sun is shining, what a pity. I am hairy, it's hot. kind of like this. Yeah. These are all drawings by Maxim from his letters. And then next to the drawing you can see the number of the letter, number 330 of 6 August 2021. So a year and a half ago.
So were these letters illustrated originally, do you know?
Yes, he was drawing sometimes. Because these are the letters I think that he was writing mostly to his sister.
This is his own illustrations.
Yeah.
His own illustrations, yes.
Yeah.
Jean,
Yes?
how did you get the manuscript out of the prison?
We cannot say it publicly because we are live streamed.
They flew. The letters flew
Flew
from
out
the
of the
prison.
window, yeah.
And once it's discovered that it's, got out of the prison and been published, could there be consequences for Maxim?
Definitely.
There always could be consequences for Maxim, for anything. But the thing is that we know, somehow also the information sneaked out, that the book is very important for Maxim. Once again, as I've said in the beginning, he treats it as art, as literature, and he believes that the literature will live long in a longer perspective. This is what is important, to tell about people's lives, to tell this story, and for him this book is extremely important.
Yes, it's very important that it's classified as short stories and as fiction, not as memoir. But there's an interesting quotation here from Vitaly Korotich, who's a Ukrainian writer, who says, he said, "The Soviet Union was destroyed by information, and this wave started from Solzhenitsyn's One Day." About the power of literature, fiction, not memoir. We knew from the start that if it was classified as memoir, then it would be more dangerous for him in prison.
Maybe he made it all up. We don't know.
Yeah.
Is it not
in a way autobiography? Is it not in a way, even though there's these tales, is it not like...
He writes about some lawyer in a cell. I don't know whether it's himself or there was another lawyer, and I don't know.
Who knows who Lenin is?
Exactly. Exactly.
Yes? Yes, you, yes.
Oh, sorry, I thought you were on. I was wondering if Maxim ever spoke about anything else that he'd written to you, Ilya, or if he obviously it's very important to him, the power of like art and literature, if that was ever something you discussed in the past.
No, I don't really know, but I'm sure, knowing Maxim, he likes to express what he sees, what he feels. He has a lot of songs. He's doing songwriting, so they are also being released. If you Google, you can find songs by Maxim Znak, and so there are. Maxim finds different ways to express himself, even being not physically with us, but we have his book, we have his songs, we have his picture, so yeah. No problem.
Do you have any more questions?
I've got a question for Jean, please. Have you been to Belarus?
Yes.
Yeah. So what would you say about this country? Did you like it there?
I love it, except I haven't been for the last 3 years.
And I'm also a question for you, Ilya. I'm thinking about sending a copy to my friend to Belarus. Do you think it's possible, or can there be any consequences?
Absolutely.
There might be.
100%.
Yeah, there might be. Because it's forbidden in Belarus, basically.
Is it
Yeah.
already?
Yeah, of course.
But
Of course.
today we've put up an e-book.
That's good.
Yeah.
That's helpful.
You have to thank Katie here for doing that.
Can you reference it? Where is it? You put it up.
Oh, it's on our website, scotlandstreetpress.com. And you just go and find Zekameron and find it. Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, Alan Flowers. I'm chairperson of the Anglo-Belarusian Society, by the way. I won't take the advert in because you can all look on Google search. Anybody who wants to keep a contact with events like this and others culturally in the UK related to Belarus. We've got one of the council members, Scottish representative, hiding here. So there we go. A lot of people across the world aware of the plight of political prisoners are active in various ways sending letters, for example, embassies. Over Christmas, there was a photograph in the British Embassy of a big pile, 1,400 cards. Can you comment on how much of this gets through, and for what does get through, what the impact is on people in prison of receiving this? And you might like to comment on what people here could do if this is a positive impact. What could people here do to continue and help the situation of those in prison?
Thank you very much. There is definitely a positive effect, and people who are in jails, they are waiting for letters for a number of reasons, because it's important for them not to be forgotten. It's important for them to feel the support, to feel solidarity. It's important for them, even you know, down to earth reason. This is something, you know, to be busy with while you are in a cell. You are reading letters, you are answering letters, you make your brain work. So it's extremely important. What's the percentage of the letters going through? I have no idea. I think it's really case by case. But I think for public figures, the percentage is very low. Some of the opposition leaders in jail don't get any letters at all. Maria Kolesnikova, Viktor Babarika, I think Sergei Tikhanovsky is also struggling receiving any letters. I think the opposition leaders, I mean the public people, they don't get anything, because one of the reasons of putting them in jail is for people to forget them. That's the goal that the Belarusian government sets. So that's why they're there. When I know that Maxim got thousands and thousands of letters when he was in cell. I was receiving, when I was in jail, like around 30-40 letters a day, and I think it's a very small percent. It was a pack like this every day, just going into the cell, and then you read all of that, you answer, and of course you understand that this all is being read by the censors, so you think what you write, but still this is extremely important, because you understand that people support you and you have something to be busy with between the breakfast, lunch and dinner.
Shall I add one more thing? There is a story here in the book called Censurion. When you read that story, you will understand better how many letters prisoners would receive.
Yes?
I have a question about letters. The story An Important L, is that an electronic letter, or what is the L?
No, it is a real letter sent by the horse, that system of intercell communication. No, it's a real one. I mean, I've taken here the way in which Maxim says it. I forget which is Vajnaya M, I think he says.
I think M stands for Malyava.
Malyava,
which is,
yeah, Malyava,
which is
that's
a slang
right,
for
letter.
inter jail
yeah. But there's no English equivalent of Malyava, so you know, still a very letter.
Yes?
Yeah, I just wanted to add on this letter topic that you were saying in the Liao. So if anyone is interested in like writing to political prisoners in Belarus, there is a great website called politzak.me, which is actually in English explaining like how you can write from abroad, because there is like a whole bunch of topics and like, you know, tips that you might benefit from. So please, if you're interested in writing to, and as Ilya was saying, there are a lot of people there. It's like actually the film there is saying like 1,200, but it's over 1,500 now. So there are a lot of people not that well known for waiting for, you know, for some lines from the outside. So I really encourage you to have a look, and yeah. So thank you, Ilya.
True.
We might draw things to a close, and so there's a little bit of time for people to meet and chat and network upstairs.
We have the letter from Maxim.
Oh, we have the letter from Maxine, of course.
Yeah.
Can you put that up? Do you want to try? I've got the translation here, Jim, that you did.
Yeah, okay.
There you go. That's it.
Okay, thank you. This is actually not an edited text, but I've looked up some of the references that Maxim makes in it. About Scotland, it's in Belarusian actually, I should say that. Although the book is written in Russian and has been translated into Belarusian by Maria Martisevich, I gather, this letter was actually written in Belarusian. About Scotland Street Press, previously I knew only about Scotland Yard. I am really happy at the thought that the translation is successful. It's really great, especially in English, the most widespread language of books. Wonderful. Thanks to those who made this miracle possible. I am very grateful. In his Legends of the Arbat, Mikhail Vela has a story about a poet from the mountains who became famous because a free translation was made of his poems by actually three, that's from me, Russian-speaking lads of Jewish nationality. If that puzzles you, I could explain. Jewish nationality. 2 of 3 were called Yakov, the third was Naum. That's an addition from me. I've forgotten who it was. Perhaps Rasul Gamzatov. Yes, it was. As a national poet of the Soviet Union. He was actually an Avar from the Caucasus. But the point is that the translations were better than the original. Perhaps it's like that here. I'll say something about that at the end. That would be good. I'm keeping an eye on the fate of the publication. Fingers crossed. Well, how can I keep my eye on anything? The view from my room is limited. Now, I just want to say something about this practice of translating interlinearly. Of course, the translation, people don't know a language like Avar. They need an interlinear Russian translation before they make that into poetry. And that was done for a number of different writers throughout what used to be the Soviet Union and is now the Russian Federation, basically, with all these languages. I have a personal view about this when somebody says, but the point is that the translations were better than the original. How do you know if you don't speak the language? Thank you.
A lot of this has been about hope and humour, and I'd just like to end by quoting from the Nobel Peace Prize last year, which was won jointly by Ales Bialyatsky, the human rights activist in prison in Belarus. And just 2 pieces from the acceptance speech, which was read by his wife, because of course he is in prison. And he says, "I believe because I know that the night ends and then the morning comes with light. I know that what pushes us forward tirelessly is hope and a dream." And one other piece. "And on December the 10th, that was last year, 2022, I want to repeat to everyone, do not be afraid." These were the words that Pope John Paul II said in the 1980s when he came to communist Poland. He didn't say anything else then, but it was enough. I believe because I know that spring always comes after winter. There's still some time if people want to go upstairs and chat and meet each other.